All right, folks, welcome back. We are going to jump right back into some politics, and we're going to talk to a great guest. He is with the Americans for Prosperity Action. His name is Chris Hudson. Chris, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm doing well today.
Well, obviously, everyone's been distracted with D.C. politics and some of those kinds of things, but here at home, you guys have been working hard, and some of the new polls have kind of come out. Let's jump right into the governor's race. Obviously, Andrew Gillum has kind of been polling in the lead for a while now, but according to some new polls over the last 2 weeks, that pretty much is a toss-up now. Is that pretty much what you guys are seeing on the ground? Is that pretty much what you're hearing?
Yeah, on the ground, in the polls, statistically tied across the board. When we knock on doors in the past, we'd seen large margins in the opposite direction when we asked the folks at the doors about the issues. But today, what we're hearing and feeling is absolute tie. I think that's a great sign for at least the candidate that we have been supporting, and that means that the race has gone in a different direction. Momentum has shifted. I think a lot of the federal stuff that's happened in the last week, Kavanaugh getting confirmed, contributes to that.
Let's talk about some of the issues, and I know you guys have run some great and very powerful ads and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about some of the issues that are really resonating with folks.
The first anywhere across the state of Florida, jobs in the economy. We had a governor and Governor Scott with a strong legislature that promoted strong economic growth, reasonable policies that gave every individual the opportunity to succeed. We find ourselves in a situation where when you talk to voters about the policies that are going to be on the ballot this November, and those policies are essentially either going forward and continuing on this upward trend we're seeing here in Florida, where folks have jobs, where unemployment is low, where the market is booming, where building is taking place, where visitors are coming and folks are moving their families, to the other direction, which is where candidate Andrew Gillum would like to take us, which is in the other direction, one that involves raising taxes on corporations, one that essentially would like to raise the cost of life for all Floridians by expanding Medicaid to who knows. These are the policies that are going to be on the ballot in November. I'll tell you, one is a really good direction to go, and that's in the path that we've been going down, and the other is just absolutely scary.
Chris, let me ask you a little bit about some of that policy detail, because I know folks tend to be so busy, they're doing their own thing. Folks are really worried about self-preservation. You're talking about economy, right? Because that economy affects people personally. And whether it's appropriate or not, they blame politicians in charge, whether they're doing good or bad, and that's how they vote. But what are some of the other policies that people are not even really quite connected to? And when you bring them up, people are like, what's he stand for? What's he want to do?
One of the things we are shocked by is when we talk to folks about, the jobs cuts and tax package that the Congress passed, which Ron DeSantis voted for previously, people are absolutely shocked that cutting taxes has had such a profound impact on the economy. And what we often do is we ask people to go look at their pay stub. And by and large, when people look at their pay stub from earlier this year and later this year, they're going, oh, wow, look, I have more money in my bank account today than I did before. Some of the other policies which are really interesting, and I think this is where you see a stark contrast between the two candidates, and it takes some time to explain, but is around the concept of cronyism. This idea that whether it's through the regulatory process in the state system or whether it's through benefiting specific companies or industries with cash incentives or exemptions that otherwise you and I and everyone else in the public would not get, these are the difference. We want to make sure that cronyism is completely eradicated from our state. And Ron DeSantis was a stalwart in Congress at eradicating or attempting to eradicate cronyism, whether it was with the Export-Import Bank, the FAA, doing some of these things that were highly controversial in which government sought to pick winners and losers. We don't have that same feeling with Andrew Gillum. What we're hearing from him is an attack on corporations, an attack on the economy, and that's not that far off from an attack on the individual. And whether you're raising taxes or you're putting in new regulations, you're still picking a winner and a loser, and that's extremely scary. That's all I can say.
what is the kind of the last question on the governor's race? We'll kind of wrap up. What is the tenure and the thought process of Gillum's? I don't want to say investigations, but some of the stuff that's happened over the last several years in Tallahassee, and of course his handling or mishandling, depending on how you want to look at that, of some of the hurricane relief and things like that. Because it seems like there's a lot of questions that are still kind of like hovering out there, kind of unanswered, and if they are, they're kind of like not getting the play because of all this other stuff.
Well, I mean, anytime during an election, it's loud, it's noisy, right? It's your mailbox is overflowing, the TV's saturated with one ad after the other.
Sure.
You know, this particular cycle had the biggest spectacle in probably American politics in a long time, outside of the election of Donald Trump. We had a Supreme Court justice nomination that it was a giant roller coaster. And, you know, we feel it ended correctly, but that just absolutely sucked all of the air and attention right out of the room. And now, you know, Florida does have a hurricane bearing down on it in the Panhandle, right? You know, arguably you could make the case that that's probably going to have the greatest impact here in the last 30 days on this election. If it's statistically tied, how people map out, how the campaigns map out this week will be an indicator of what happens. How they've mapped out or dealt with hurricanes or natural disasters in the past will be of significant importance. And how they identify with complying with the law, how they identify with making sure that Floridians come first. These are the things that people are going to be talking about over the next week and a half. And there's going to be a lot of deeper things on folks' plates. You know, we find ourselves in a situation that this hurricane, like Irma last year, it's just coming. You know, it's coming. It's not turning around. And so I would hazard a guess that since it's headed to Andrew Gillum's neck of the woods, he's probably going to spend a considerable amount of time up there, as would probably Governor Scott, because one, it's Governor Scott's job, and two, one of the cities that likely will be impacted is Andrew Gillum's. And we saw how that worked out last year when a hurricane approached Tallahassee, a tropical storm. But you know what? Ron DeSantis, I would hazard a guess, is going to be available, but I think he knows where his comparative advantage is, and that's to sit tight, wait till the call happens, work to make sure everybody's okay, but largely continue to get the message out there about the difference between these two candidates, and that's what I think you will probably see.
Absolutely great analysis. Absolutely great.